Hello and welcome to today's European SharePoint Office 365 and Azure Community webinar. My name is Shane and I am delighted to be joined by Michael Reichert, who will be talking to you about anticipating change, how to future-proof your business applications. Remember to join in the conversation about today's webinar on Twitter. Our Twitter handle is @EuropeanSP and our hashtag is ESPC17. After the webinar, we will have a questions and answers session. Type any questions you have for Michael into the questions window. Some questions will be selected and answered at the end of the presentation. This webinar will be recorded and you will be notified by email when it is available. Don't forget to join us in Dublin from the 13th to the 16th of November 2017 for the European SharePoint Office 365 and Azure Conference. Since so much happened at Ignite, our tickets are selling fast, so book today at sharepointeurope.com to avoid disappointment. And now I'm going to pass you over to our webinar presenter, Michael Reichert. Hello, Michael.
Hello, Shane. Thank you for the introduction. Hello, everyone.
Okay, so I can see your screen, Michael. Michael, before we get started, just one quick question. Can I ask you, what would you say to someone who is thinking about attending ESPC 17 but are not quite sure?
Well, ESPC is #1 conference on my list for multiple years now. Suffice to say, this year's edition would be my 5th in a row.
Wow.
It's always a fantastic event. I really appreciate it for the atmosphere, for the access to the latest knowledge and to many experts from around the world. And all in all, it's a fantastic event that I'm always looking forward to all year.
Super. Well, Michael, take it away. I'll talk to you later.
Thank you very much. So, a while ago, my colleague Greg delivered a webinar on how to create a business application from scratch within 45 minutes. If you haven't seen that one, I really encourage you to check it out because it's really fantastic and it shows you how quickly and easily business applications can be delivered. However, today, what I want to focus on is what happens after you deliver the business application, because this is definitely not the end of the application lifecycle, and it's very wise to be prepared for what future might bring you. So in terms of the agenda, very quickly, without any additional slide, what I want to talk about today is why this change is happening and why is it so important to be prepared for the change. How does change management works for most of the solutions on the market, especially from the SharePoint world. I'm going to talk to you on how can you prepare yourself for this change upfront. And also I'll show you how we in WebCon solve the change management. This is going to be the only part of the presentation that I'll be talking about specific product, but I believe it's going to be fun because I'm going to show you something live, and then of course we'll bring up some abstracts from today's session. So just to lay the ground for the conversation, business applications. How do I understand what they are? Basically, in terms of the SharePoint world, what I mean by business application is typically a combination of workflow, of forms, of business rules. Frequently, those applications are also integrated with external systems. So this is what I consider a business application, actually a set of multiple features combined. And also in terms of how to apply those business applications, there's really a wide range of possibilities here. Of course, you have some classic examples like cost approval, leave request, business trip settlement, and so on. But also you can implement business applications to touch the core of your business. So that would be industry-specific application or even company-specific application. And of course, you can also implement variety of supportive applications for some minor business processes. And in terms of the main reasons, why would you need a business application and why companies decide to implement them? First of all, they want to get digital, believe it or not, but many companies are still in progress in terms of going digital, so they want to get rid of manual processes and so-called paper processes. One of the best examples from the market is invoice approval. So it's basically much easier to handle everything digitally rather than physically taking paper and moving it around the departments. Also, business applications help with introducing best practices and also enforcing certain company rules. So while we're on the subject of cost approval and invoice approval, on paper or in manual process outside of any system, you can handle that in many different ways, and the outcome is in many cases surprising, not in the positive way, but the system will help you with governing those processes. And for example, if certain information is required to be entered on the form, the user won't be able to proceed further without that. And also what is really important is the integration part. So whenever we can extract, for example, the list of companies from CRM like Salesforce and provide the list of them that is simply selectable from the form level, then we should definitely do that. And also the integration should go the other way around. So whenever an approved invoice should be inserted into ERP system like SAP, it should be doable by the system itself rather than manually, which actually means less manual input from the users, and as a result, higher efficiency, as simple as that. And also, what I believe is that business application help with transparency of business processes in the organization. So in terms of those dreadful invoices, if you have a proper business application that handles that, and then you can easily tell, for example, where this invoice is currently at, who's responsible for it, how long did it take to get there, and so on and so forth. And all of that can translate into gaining competitive edge, by which I mean the employees can focus less on repetitive daily work, and they can rather spend more time on providing new ideas and to develop the business further. And typically, especially in the past, companies developed business application by simply hard coding. And the definite plus of the hard-coded application that is created from scratch is that it will be adjusted to the specific needs of the company. And it's, of course, a very important aspect of it. But as you may imagine, and as you know probably, it takes a lot of time to deliver. Custom development sometimes takes months, if not years. It also requires proper skill set. It's not so easy to find a developer that would be experienced and skilled. And especially if your project is big, then you would require a team of developers. But I believe the most important downsides of hard-coded custom applications is the maintenance and modifications that you have to introduce after it's implemented and running. If you ask any developer if he or she would like to take over someone else's code, I believe in 99% of cases the answer would be no, because it's simply too difficult to do. And in many cases, and I've experienced those from our clients, you will spend the same time on creating the same application from scratch rather than taking over the code and introducing some modifications to it, assuming you don't know that code at all. So as a result, companies more and more frequently tend to turn to so-called low-code solutions or no-code solutions, which basically, instead of hard coding, allow you to deliver business applications by providing certain configuration within certain platform that you select, reducing custom code to zero, to minimum. Maybe they provide an options for some low code or soft code possibilities here, like for example, compared to .NET or Java, JavaScript can be considered as a soft code. And as a result, what you get is a solution that is more or less adjusted to your specific needs based on the solution that you select. But what is really important is that it's much faster to configure than to write a code, assuming we have the same resources available. It requires less skill. Again, it's much easier to drag and drop, select some tick boxes and so on, rather than to write a code. And of course, it requires less resources when we compare one-to-one. However, in most of the solutions, still modifications and ongoing maintenance after the initial deployment is still tough. And this is basically the problem that not many vendors, many consultants will make you aware of. Because initially, when you take a low-code solution or no-code solution, you're able to deliver fast and easily. And basically, during the first honeymoon period, you'll be very happy. However, somewhere along the way, the business requirements will change. And you'll be required to change the business applications that are running. At the same time, you'll also have to implement new ones, because this is something that business users will simply expect you to do. And since the modifications are not so easy to deliver, after a while, you may end up with simply taking care of what's already implemented rather than delivering some new applications. And this is really a huge downside. And you don't have to believe me that being prepared for change is really important, but I think Gartner, which is the biggest research organization in the field of IT, I think they're a trusted partner in terms of the market knowledge. And what they say is that less innovative BPM solutions, and please keep in mind, based on the vendor, on the market, you can name those solutions as workflow solutions, BPM solutions, rapid application development solutions, and so on. So there are many names for similar functionalities. But coming back to the original point, less innovative solutions that are not fit for the change in the future will prevent 80% of companies from reaching their goals. And additionally, only 30% of basically business processes are static enough to be implemented once, and basically they'll be running fine for many years. But the remaining 60% are the business processes that will definitely change, or there is a very, very high chance that they will. And this is what you have to be prepared for. And last but not least, basically 70% of effective business models will be capable of handling those business processes that change frequently, and that will simply require proper approach. And how does change management looks like? This is true to most of the solutions on the market, and especially true in the SharePoint world, where you have SharePoint Workflow Engine, many third-party solutions, and so on. And the way it works, we can call process versioning. And what it implies that whenever you introduce a modification into the workflow definition, this new modification will be available only for new workflow instances. So let's say I have a cost approval somewhere along the way in the process, for example, in financial approval. I want to have a change done, and that should be visible and available right away, but it's actually not possible. Because once initiated workflow instances simply have to finish as they started. And this is a real problem, especially if you consider long-term business processes, like, for example, agreement processing. So if you imagine one quite complex process for agreement processing, where at first you put some basic parameters of your agreement, then you can generate that agreement, you work on the Word file, you negotiate with the client, you send him a draft, then you are negotiating prices, make some changes again, and so on and so forth. It all takes time. It can take 6, 7, 8, 9 months. And if at some point somebody requires you to provide a change into that process, for example, a CEO says, guys, from now on, I want all of the agreements, all of the contracts which have more than 10% of a discount to get directly through me. And let's say you have 600 of those already somewhere along the way, then you cannot simply satisfy this need of the CEO. In some of the solutions, it's possible to introduce changes that would affect already running instances, but it typically requires a significant amount of work. From what I know, in many cases, that means that you have to withdraw all of the running workflow instances, make a change, and retrieve them back along with the whole history of what's been going on with them, which is truly a lot of hassle. And something that also is very, very important, especially if you think about the bigger picture, is that with every change of the workflow definition, you actually create a separate version of that workflow. Which means that, especially for those long-lasting processes, you may end up with multiple different versions of that process. And what is really important, especially from the IT perspective, you would have to maintain them all. And it's really not a comfortable situation to be in. So this is how process versioning works. I'm not saying this is the only way that all of the solutions on the market work, but this is the most common way of how the introduction of changes into running processes work. And in terms of how can you prepare yourself for those changes, I have 5 tips for you that I encourage you to consider before you implement those business applications. So first solution, and it's really a best practice not only in business application world, in programming as well, is to divide especially complex workflows into smaller bits or chunks, however you want to call them. And that will allow you to introduce change into just a single part of the whole big process, and only that part will be affected, and the rest can be running smoothly as it was before. The second part that relates to the first one is not to create forms that would contain all of the data that is simply possible or existing somewhere. That creates multiple problems. First of all, again, changes and maintenance, especially if you have many relations between fields and so on. You have some rules applied that you have to maintain and you have to keep in mind whenever you change anything. And also in some of the cases, especially in SharePoint, the performance may suffer. And also user adoption. If you display users' forms that have 4, 5, 6 pages, then nobody wants to see that really. So I would really divide the data on the forms into, let's say, 3 categories. First one, must-haves. Then the second one, nice-to-haves. And the third one, something that you can live without at certain stage of the workflow. The other tip I can give you is whenever your solution allows for that, then create configuration that can be reused in multiple places. That's because whenever you need to provide a change, let's say in a business rule, then you would be providing that change in a single place rather than in multiple different places. So reusability is a significant factor for the future-proofness of your applications. And then comes the performance. And this is a case that I would say is very significant for SharePoint, because whenever you want to store data on SharePoint lists, you have to be aware of the limits of the SharePoint list. There's this famous 5,000 items per list threshold, and you simply have to be aware of that. So before you implement, think about how many users will be using your application and how frequently they will do that. Because if you have 500 people, they will use your application once a day. Then after 10 days, you already reached the threshold. In SharePoint on-premises, there are many ways to work around that limit, to extend it further, and so on. You will find many articles on that. Although in Office 365, this is much bigger issue. So this is something to keep in mind. And last but not least, if you have actions that typically require a lot of CPU, a lot of RAM, and so on, and then it may be wise to simply extract them from the main workflow into some small sub-workflow, because in some cases it may simply paralyze the whole business application, and in such case, only a small bit would be handled outside of it, which also affects the performance. I've heard some stories, especially if you run some queries on the SQL and so on, that would be fit for that kind of way of proceeding. So those would be my tips and tricks for the change management whenever you have process versioning in place. This is really important before the project, and also this is really important before even selecting a solution, to find out how this change can be done. And now what I want to very shortly show you is how do we at Webcom solve the change management case. We have this instant change technology applied to the product, and what we offer is totally different approach to change. So basically, what you get is results that are instantly available. And there is no deployment process or redeployment process. There is no downtime and so on. You make a change, you save, and it's there. And I will show it to you in a second how it works. Second of all, we do not create separate versions of the process, which means that yes, you will have to provide changes, and this is basically the nature of business. And for business applications to be effective, they have to keep up with those changes. But at the same time, we will not multiply the number of versions of your workflow definitions or process definitions and so on, however you want to call it. We will be working on the same one. And as I said, in the long run, this is very important from the maintenance and from the change perspective, because you would only have one application to maintain. And that, of course, translates to less time and less effort spent for the ongoing maintenance and changes. And in the long run, this actually translates to the ability to not only keep up with the changes, ongoing changes, but also to be able to implement more and more applications without significantly growing your team or ordering more and more services from external company. So what I want to consider are two examples, practical, that frequently happen to many of the companies. The first one would be that you have already running application, and then you decide or you realize that an additional form field is needed. The thing is that you have 15 steps of the workflow. Basically, you can insert any significant number here. And how it works in SharePoint, whenever you have workflow steps, you have to have separate forms for each and every step of the workflow, which actually means that as a result, if you need to provide modification that would be available for all of the 15 steps of the workflow, you actually have to provide that modification 15 times. So even if you assume that each change will take you 15 minutes, which is, let's be honest, not too much, that actually extends to almost half a day for the whole one workflow. But what I wanted to show you is how we solve such cases, and just to show you a different approach of dealing with those kind of situations. So I'm turning the PowerPoint presentation off for a moment. I'll connect to my remote desktop, and here you can see SharePoint site, and I've actually created a nice workflow that basically allows to request for attendance for any conference. So basically an employee can specify the details of the conference and ask his superiors if it's okay for him to attend. As you can see, I already have some of the requests running. So of course I will select the one that relates to European SharePoint conference. And as you can see, it's running. Some data is already there. It has a unique number applied, an ID. It actually went from a first step to the second step of the workflow. And then we can imagine a situation that, hey, actually on the form here, I have a start date of the conference, but I don't know when it ends. So there is some information missing. And since the instance is running, typically when you would have process versioning, you have a quite significant problem. But in our case, as I mentioned before, this instant change allows you to get results instantly, and let me show you how. So I'm switching to the Designer Studio. This is our own application for configuration of forms, workflows, business rules, integration, and so on. So basically we have all in one. This is my workflow. It's not exactly 15 steps, but even with that kind of number, you'll immediately get the idea. How does it work? In my particular request for ESPC attendance, we are here in Marketing Department Review. And immediately here, I would like to have a field that would specify the end date. So for that purpose, I just go to the configuration of fields. I have a start date here, but I also want to have an end date, so I just click New Form Field. At first, I have to give it a name, end date, and then I have to select the type of the field, and of course, date and time would be the proper one. And please have a look at this one. The only thing I have to do for this field to appear across my whole workflow is to get to the configuration piece that we call field matrix. And here I can see all of the fields that were previously created for the purpose of this particular application, and the end date that I've just created appeared here. And what I can do is basically decide how this field should behave at each and every step of my workflow. So I can make it visible, which also means it's editable. I can make it read-only or required in any given step of the workflow. And what is very neat, I can immediately select one of the available options. So for example, when I click set all to visible, this new field will be available across all of the workflow steps, but also from on the level of marketing department review, I would like to have that step to be required. And this is the best part. Please note this is entirely live. You click save, you get back to your form. Please note right now I just have a start date and that's it in terms of the date fields. But when I refresh, then my end date field is already here, and I can easily select a date of when the conference ends. If I'm not mistaken, that's November 16th. And of course, I can save this, and that's it. By the way, for those of you that really take care of the user experience, I agree it's the best way to have start date and end date close together. So let me get back to it and just refer to it. So in this case, this is how we decide where fields should be placed. And let's say I want to have it right under the start date. I click save, get back, refresh, and it's there. So as you can see, this is the instant change. This is where the name is coming from. You click, you save, you refresh, and that's it. There's no deployment. This workflow instance doesn't have to end to have this change available. It's there. And let me also show you our change approach on another example. So let's say we have a workflow that is running, and then one of the decision makers decides we need to have an additional approval step available in this workflow, and of course we need it now. So again, how does it work with process versioning? Basically, there's not many things that you can do, except the one that I've already indicated, that if you can withdraw all of the instances, make a change and retrieve back, then you would have to you would have that extra step available. But other than that, you simply have to create a new workflow instance to have this available. However, again, in our case, it's much simpler. So let me get back to the studio again. As you can see, we're still in this marketing department review step of the workflow, but let's say directly from here, I would like to have an access to something new, something that wasn't created before. So let's say that we first go to the sponsorship package review, and then we'll add a new consultation step. To do that, I select a path. We should have a booth. So basically, we're not only sending delegates, but also we'll be presenting ourselves. So here we are in the sponsorship package review, which is here. And let's assume that directly from here, I also want to have a step that will allow me to consult, for example, with Shane. So I drag and drop a new step, and I'll call it consultation with Shane. And then I connect it with a path. And as you may have noticed, the paths, in our case, are visualized on the form as buttons on the bottom of the form. So I'll call this one Ask Shane. It's important to have a proper naming because step names will be visible on reports. They basically define the status of your workflow, and this will be basically a button, so it's also relevant. The only thing I have to do is to specify who should be responsible for consulting with Shane. Just for the sake of the quickness, I'll select myself. And this is the best part. You click Save, go back, and please note, right now I only have the button to say the sponsorship package has been selected, but when I refresh, Ask Shane is already there, and also on the list of all available steps, you will be able to see that a new step appeared. So here we are. I can simply click it. I just get a confirmation, yes, you've actually proceeded further. And as you can see, we actually proceeded to the step of consultation with Shane. Something that is quite obvious here is that we do not have any metadata available here on this form. But as you've seen before, this is something that we can configure very, very quickly. So my new step of consultation with Shane is here. And this time, what I will do is I will simply copy a configuration of my fields from one of the previous steps, let's say from marketing department review. And that also will apply for the right panel, because I want to have this cool Google map available as well. And again, save, get back, refresh. And this is how quickly you can get the results. So that's it about how web consoles the change management. I think it gives you a nice idea how do we deal with new workflow steps, with new fields, with creating forms for each and every step of the workflow. This is how we work. So let me get back very, very quickly to the PowerPoint presentation. And what I want to summarize with is what are the results of having a proper approach to change management, especially in terms of the whole application lifecycle. Well, first of all, something that especially in the past decision makers were very, very afraid of is to sign the analysis document. That specifically in many cases applied to the custom solutions, to the hard-coded ones, because you have to very, very thoroughly specify your requirements, your needs, because simply any modification after it is running will not be so easy to deliver, which actually resulted to in a way that the analysis in many cases was held, within months, because nobody wanted to make a final go and sign this document. That of course applies to other implementations as well, to low code or no code as well. But of course, in the low code, no code area, it's a little bit better. And if the business knows that it's possible to introduce changes after we go live, this builds a lot of confidence, because they know that they do not have to, spend weeks on getting into very, very small details of your business processes. They can specify the core functionalities, implement, and instantly get feedback from the end users. What's good, what's bad, what else is needed, and build on top of that. And that actually translates to lower risk of every implementation project, because you can work in this iterative way that you can make available the business applications fairly quickly, get feedback, get back to it, provide some modifications, and get it running right away. And in the long run, something that I already indicated, this translates to ability to have truly manageable and whole application ecosystem. So after 4, 5, 6 years, you have plenty of business applications that are running, and you are able to keep them up to date with the business requirements. But at the same time, you are still able to implement more and more applications based on the same platform. And that really makes all of the decision makers, all of the financial officers happy, because you get constant return on investment. It's not only the honeymoon period when you implement quickly, people are happy, but after a while it gets more and more difficult. It's constant benefits, but it's also, you have to keep in mind that this is also a constant benefit for the end users. And something that we actually observe from our experience is that once you have successful implementation of any application, then people will actually want more. And people will be coming to the IT department, to the decision makers, asking for more. So it's kind of a snowball effect, that once you get going and it's successful, people will require more and more and more. And also we have to be prepared for that. And last but not least, here's a buzzword that is really popular recently: DevOps. Well, in the past we had agile, which was a short revolution in terms of how to approach IT projects. When you have short iterations, and during those short iterations you can already show the effects of your work. But as experience shown, in many cases, after several iterations, you have to spend at least a few more that will not bring any visible benefits, because you have to take care of what's underneath the applications that you are delivering, which is in many cases called the technological debt. So you can have something that is working, but for example, to be scalable, you have to work on the guts of the application to make it future-proof. And so this agile approach wasn't so revolutionary. So now we have DevOps, which actually assumes a close cooperation of IT people with business people, with operations people, in order to implement applications. And I believe if you have a proper solution that will allow you to deliver those applications in a low-code or no-code manner, and at the same time that will allow you to constantly keep it up to the business requirements, to constantly change it, then DevOps is actually achievable, and it makes a lot of sense. Otherwise, you would simply end up with another long project with unknown results. So that's it. That's it from me. I really encourage you to explore the change management, and also I really encourage you to visit our website to know more about it. The link is displayed here. It's webcon.com. And of course, we as Webcon will be attending European SharePoint Conference. Actually, we're going to be a main sponsor here, so feel free to have a chat, to say hi, to tell us about your requirements, your needs. We're always happy to help, happy to discuss all of the things that revolve around SharePoint, around business applications. So thank you very much, and if there are any questions, I'll be happy to answer.
Thanks, Mikhail, for a great presentation. Yes, we do have some questions, so I'll kick off straight away. Based on the examples you've shown, what happens if there's actually a need for the workflow to finish the way it started?
Okay. This is basically a typical case of when you start in a specific manner, you have to finish the old way. So this process versioning approach. In our solution, it's also possible to provide a sort of a versioning approach. Although from my experience, the requirement for process to finish precisely the way it was designed at the very beginning typically exists only in financial services when there are strict regulations towards how the process should work, and it cannot be changed across the whole period of agreement being in effect. So it's possible, but I believe in any other case, it's even encouraged to be rather flexible.
Okay. And if you have any questions, feel free to type them in. Next question. Is there a mechanism for migration of changes between development, test, and production environments in your solution?
Yes. Of course. Here during this presentation, I kind of simulated a situation where changes would be made directly into production environment, which, let's be honest, in most of the cases, people preferred to refrain from. However, yes, we do have a very neat and automated mechanism of migrating changes between environments. The way it works, it's simply you can export the whole business application definition into a single file. So you provide some changes, take a file to a production environment, and you simply import it. And that's it. Changes are available instantly, just the way I would provide them manually.
Okay, great. And next question, how does your product compete with Agile Point? So UN uses AP and was curious if your product handles app designs better or simply more efficient or easier than AP.
Well, I'm afraid we do not have that much of a time. What I can tell at the very moment without going into very deep into details is that from what I know, Agile Point has a similar concept towards the change management. So in this way we are similar, but of course there are many things that we solve differently. I don't really want to get that into this discussion during the webinar. So if you could, approach me directly, the email is available here. Then I would appreciate it, and I'll be happy to tackle this subject.
Excellent. Mikhail, thank you so much for your time today. Very much appreciated making this contribution to the community, and really looking forward to seeing you again in about 5 weeks' time in Dublin. Exactly.
Thank you very much. It was a pleasure.
Thanks, Mikhail. Okay, everybody. Once again, thank you to Mikhail there for his fantastic webinar. That's absolutely brilliant stuff. Okay, that is it for now. Join us for our next webinar on Tuesday, October 17th, 2017 at 11 a.m. CEST, where Bernd Hess, Senior Product Manager at Group Business Software, will present on Rapid Workflow Implementation with GBS App Designer, a walkthrough of a workflow with SAP integration. Register now at sharepointeurope.com/register-for-webinars. Okay, thank you all for attending and have a great day.